We've got a very special guest joining us today from the Subway to Shea podcast, Anthony Rivera. The last time he was on the show, we were on a stream reacting to the last hours of the trade deadline, so it's been a while. So how you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing great, man. Great. Excited to be back on with you guys. It's always a fun time. Ready to make some grades.
So for those who don't know about your podcast and what you do over there, you can just give us a little bit of a rundown.
Yeah, I go over, all the Mets news of the week. It's usually a weekly podcast. Sometimes I have interviews on. Last week I had on Jay Horowitz from the Mets. So keep rolling, getting close to 100th episode, which will be a couple weeks away. I write for risingapple.com as well. You can check them out on Fansided. And excited to get this season going, man. A lot to do, a lot to accomplish, and hopefully it ends with this time with the World Series championship.
Fingers crossed. Well, today, as it was just hinted by Anthony, is a very special podcast episode, one of our favorite times of the year, which is off-season grades. We are going to go through the 11 most notable off-season moves that the Mets made this winter and grade them based on how much we like that move. We love doing this every year because after 162 games, we get to look back laughing about how wrong Frank About Sports is every year. So here we go. 60 minutes of brutal honesty begins now. Welcome to episode 8 of the Mets Weekly Podcast. So before we get into all of it, y'all know the drill by now. Subscribe to the Mets Weekly channel. If you have not already, turn on post notifications for new videos, shorts, live streams, and of course this very podcast, which comes out every single Monday now officially. And all of our other outlets, TikTok, Twitter, all of our individual links are in the description. Also, make sure to go check out Anthony's podcast, Subway to Shea. The links will be in the description if you have not seen that already. So, on to the other people on the panel, the regulars.
I'm ready to get started. We've done all these episodes talking about what the Mets should have done, what the Mets have done, and I'm just ready to see it play out. It's been a longer offseason we would hope for. We didn't want to go out in the wild card round. We were hoping to be, a shorter time period in between Mets games. But, we're getting really close. Super Bowl is over. It's time to play.
Yeah, we can finally put the offseason away and we can stop yelling about, we need to sign this guy and this guy. Now we get to see how the Ep-Dog and all his moves that everyone thought was amazing, let's see how they really play out on the field, not just looking at old numbers and, hey, now we'll see how they play in a Met uniform. Because we all know, when you put on a Mets jersey, whatever you did beforehand doesn't always translate.
And I'm just excited the baseball is back again. It is that time of year in spring where you have a little bit of stress because you're hoping everybody comes back healthy, but the games don't count. So if the Mets lose 13-0 in a preseason game, I'm not stressing at all. Let's get into the offseason, and we're going to start this off with how the Mets began the offseason, which was very quickly, specifically a day after the World Series. The Mets extended Edwin Diaz to a 5-year, $102 million contract, the richest a reliever has ever received in baseball history. This deal includes a 4-year player option along with a team option for a possible 6th year worth over $20 million. Diaz came off a historic season, striking out 50.2% of batters faced and posting a 1.31 earned run average in 62 innings pitched.
To your deal. The player is the best reliever in baseball, but I've made it clear throughout this channel, I do not want to give a long-term deal to a reliever. So as great as Edwin Diaz is, I'm going to give it an A. Because there is a chance this could be a 4-year deal. If he goes out and continues to be the reliever that he was last season, he opts out and then we'll renegotiate. But there is a world where this is another Aroldis Chapman contract and you're stuck with him for 5 years minimum. Relievers are too finicky for this type of long-term commitment. Yes, Diaz is the best reliever in the game. There's no argument against that. But I have to stay to my morals. I do not want to pay relievers more than 2 years, 3 a max. That the fact that this could be a 5, maybe even a 6-year deal, if 6 years, be amazing. That means he went out and he balled. But I just don't feel as great as he is, I never feel comfortable giving relievers long-term deals because you know how that position is. So as great as Diaz is, I'll give it an A, but I have a horrible feeling about this deal down the line.
Yeah, he took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, I have to agree. I've always not liked giving relievers so much because every year it's a different situation with them. I mean, look at what happened with Aaron Loop. He had probably one of the best seasons a reliever could ever have. He goes to Anaheim and gets the 2-year deal. Wasn't even close to what the player that he was when he was with the Mets. Edwin Diaz obviously is a different situation. He was the best reliever in all of baseball last year. And it's like we're kind of getting some kind of, reversal in our fortunes, right? I mean, he was terrible when he came with us in 2019 and has somehow turned those boos into cheers. And he actually loves it here and decided to sign way before he could even get to free agency, which was surprising to me. I would thought he would at least want to try to get out there. But, I have to give him an A as well for that, getting it done quickly. I mean, look at the rest of, the bullpen. Who are you going to make as a closer? Were you going to go after somebody like a Kenley Jansen? I don't want him. Craig Kimbrell, I don't want him either as a closer. Edwin Diaz is the best bet. He seems like he's going to continue to pitch well here. He loves pitching here. And, the only hope I have is that he just doesn't get hurt in the WBC come next couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mets were caught in a tough spot because Diaz did have such a big year for them. I mean, I talked about plenty of times, but it was just really frustrating. There were plenty of games where the Mets had a pretty significant lead and they just couldn't trust anybody else. So Edwin Diaz had to come in and save the day and pitch more than he should have, whether it was, 6-out saves or pitching, twice in the same day. I mean, the Mets really relied on him a lot. He was a big part of their success. So they made him their top priority. The fact that he was, of all the expiring free agents, the first guy they said as soon as we had the chance, we were going to get the deal done. It shows you how high they think of him. I think it goes without saying we're all in agreement that anytime you do multiple year deal to a reliever, it is risky. I think for just this season, if we're talking about just the 2023 season, it'll turn to be a really good move for the Mets. But there definitely always is that concern of the 5 years, potentially even 6 years, who knows. So I think because of those risks that are involved and the fact that, okay, I have $100 million and I'm giving it to a reliever where the offense had a lot of struggles in the playoffs as my first 100 minutes going to the bullpen, a guy I already had. Interesting decision. I understand why they did it, but overall I go A-.
I was waiting for you to say with guys that they had to bring in. I was waiting for a Yohan Lopez shout out, and I didn't get it. So your self-control is there. I'm proud of you.
I mean, I know that's not on here, but December 21st is always going to be a very memorable day for me. I mean, the day that they released him, it was just such a wonderful day. That was such an early Christmas gift. It was great.
I can't believe you actually marked that shit down. All right.
I'm looking at. I have the transaction page open right here on my computer, so I'm staring at it.
I have the same morals as Andrew in this situation where multi-year deals to relievers can be extremely risky and they go in and out, finicky. But I mean, I have to give it an A as well because, this is basically a credit to my hard work over the years. Propaganda for Edwin Diaz of proving to everyone of how amazing he is. But no, I'm not taking credit for it. But the trumpets were becoming worldwide throughout the season. I mean, that's how big this was. I'm not going to go into how elite the guy is. I mean, I've said this so many times on here. He came off of one of the worst seasons a reliever can have, especially in New York. And New York is a very tough place to play, no matter who you are, no matter if you have, a stable mental health or you don't. It is a very tough place to play. And the fact that he came off of a really tough 2019 and you transform it to now 2022, a historic season, and he wanted to stay here and he didn't even allow himself to go to free agency. He went straight to the Mets and got a rich deal from them. I mean, he wanted to stay here and he loves it here. He loves the energy and I can't blame him. I mean, what was created with the whole trumpet thing, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, and I hope to hear it for years and years to come. That being said, again, it's risky. Who knows? We've seen the worst of Edwin Diaz. We have seen the best of Edwin Diaz. So, again, whatever, but I'm a huge Diaz fan. I've been for a long time. I'm happy that he's staying. They definitely went with the mindset of blowing up this bullpen of limited arms that they had in this bullpen last year, where Ottavino and Diaz were like the only top reliable relievers throughout the entire year. So I'm glad that they blew this thing up, built a new one around Edwin Diaz, and they really, they focused on bringing in these younger arms and building it around him. And they definitely are building it around him now, because $102 million reliever, that's a lot. And it's something that we have never seen before. And now we transfer the timeline. The Mets were quite active in the winter meetings. One of those big moves was a trade. The Mets acquired lefty reliever Brooks Raley from the Rays in exchange for 20-year-old pitching prospect Keyshawn Askew. Raley is entering a 35-year-old season, coming off a very anticipated breakout year, posting a 2.68 earned run average, a 2.74 fielding independent pitching, striking out 27.9% of batters in 53.2 innings pitched. Now, Raley's contract will earn him $4.5 million this year, and it includes a $6.5 million team option for next year.
I mean, obviously, I'm going to give this one a B, because I always feel like the Mets need more than one lefty reliever. I have been asking for Andrew Chafin for about 2 years now, and still we haven't gotten him.
Welcome to the club.
The beginning of last offseason, trade deadline, now, and now he's going off to, where's he going? To the Cubs, I think it is. I can't remember where he's going off to. Arizona? Okay. Yeah. I really wanted him to be in here as well. They need not only one lefty, they need two guys in there, and they don't ever do that. They tried last year with some makeshift, bottom feeding relievers, and it didn't work. And we saw how terrible they were, chasing Shreve and Rodriguez. It was awful. So I'm going to give this a B, and only because last season was his best season. But after that, he hasn't had an ERA under 3.94 for the rest of his career. 2012, 8.14, 2013, 5.14. It's pretty up there. Last season was his best season, and maybe it's because Tampa Bay got the best out of him and know how to, groom these pitchers. And, I assume Jeremy Hefner will do the same, but I think tying him to just needing another reliever gives me just a B for him. He's just not that stud left-handed reliever that I think we're going to see, but, hopefully he proves me wrong.
Yeah, I actually really liked the Raley addition, and more so it's because of the very team-friendly contract that he has. I think that, we talk about the Mets have needed a lefty for a long time. Loop had that, remarkable season we just talked about in the previous segment, but it was such a major struggle. Like, it isn't one thing, like Andy was saying, having two lefties. The Mets even have one lefty they can rely on. So, two is like, oh my gosh, a miracle. It's like, let's just get one at first. You know what I mean? So, I can't really hold it against Brooks Raley, the player, that the Mets don't have other lefties. I think just like in a vacuum, just what Raley does by himself, he put up such good numbers. He had his ERA, which I love, but also like all those advanced numbers that Carson loves and the break on his slider and things like that. Like, he has all that going for him. He's coming from Tampa Bay, which I always give extra bonus points to, because I have a thing for them. So they always get bonus points for me in their grades. But what I like is that team-friendly contract of, okay, you're paying him, $5 million, and then you have that club option. That's the big thing, club option, because if Raley comes here and he goes to the pitcher that he was before he's in Tampa Bay and he stinks, you just cut it and you say, all right, forget it. Decline the option. He's a free agent. But if he's anywhere close to the guy he was in Tampa Bay, it's like, okay, well, now we have him for 2 years, and still we have him at such a team-friendly number. When you look at what Taylor Rogers got, I think it was like 3 years, $33 million. It's like, oh my gosh, at least we didn't do that. At least we got Raley, 2 years, $10 million. But then we look at what Chafin got 1 year, $7 million. It's weird. I definitely think this whole reliever market from beginning to end, it started off pretty crazy. We talked about Diaz getting 5 years. We saw some of the Padres guys get 3 years. We saw The guy that Montero that was a Met with the Astros, he got 3 years. So I mean, like we're just seeing a lot of crazy contracts. Like, well, what is Chafin going to get? That's what I was concerned. I was like, the Mets probably just aren't going to do it because he gets something ridiculous. But then he gets such a cheap deal because we're now, spring training's about to start. So I think the Mets, they were trying to be proactive. They were trying to act early in the offseason. So they didn't really know the full value yet. So I can't hold all that against Raley because of the time that they made the decision. Like Carter said, it was 2 months ago. I mean, compared to Chafin just signing this past week. So I like what the Mets did. I give it an A+ only because I liked Keyshawn Askew a lot. I thought he definitely had some intrigue with his arm slot, with his stuff, but his control was an issue. So it comes down to you're in win now mode. You hope Askew could become Brooks Raley. I mean, that's the hope. You got to go with the guarantee. As close to a guaranteed thing as you can, and that's what Raley.
Yeah, and I think Aaron Loup is very similar in this situation because if you look at Aaron Loup's career before he became a Met, it's very similar to Brooks Raley. I mean, I think Loup definitely had 2 good years, one with Toronto and then one with Tampa before he came to the Mets. Raley's had the one. If you're just looking at just the numbers of his ERA's bad, which is true, he has not had the greatest ERA. But if you look at we make the joke on this channel, he has a good baseball savant page. Brooks Raley is the definition of, man, that guy's got a good baseball savant page for the last 3 years. And yes, Frank makes the point, it's always good to grab an arm from Tampa because they are just the pitching factory. And down the line, is Keyshawn Askew going to be Brooks Raley? I'd make a good bet, especially in the Tampa Bay Rays pitching lab that they have. They'll fix him and he will be the next, Yarbrough or, Raley himself. I gave it an A. I want Chafin, same as you. I've been banging that drum as a fellow Andrew. Would love to have an Andrew in the pen. But for some reason, Epler, Zach Scott, Brody, they just don't like cool mustaches and beautiful hair. So I guess Andrew Chafin, until he shaves that, probably is never going to be a Met at this point. And I'll continue banging at the deadline, even though I think the Diamondbacks will be better. He'll probably still get flipped at the deadline. And hell, would have been absolutely amazing to have Raley and Chafin. In the world, again, Billy Epler and these guys just don't like Chafin for some reason, but gave whatever they gave to Tommy Pham. I get it. You needed an outfielder. You got to just use that money and then go out and sign some more minor league depth outfielders. But besides the point, I gave it an A. This is my favorite external free agent addition. So obviously there's a certain guy we'll get to later who I'll be biased towards, but this was my favorite outside guy to add because you can use him in any situation. High leverage, you can use him as that old school loogie. Here's Freddie Freeman to play the Dodgers. You bring him in for 1 AB, but also can get right-handed hitters out as well. So for me, it's an A. Is there a risk factor? Because maybe, again, that Tampa Bay loves, but the analytics and the nerds are going to love him because he does have the data and the pitch mix and the stuff. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Am I like all of you? I've been banging a second lefty, not just Chafin like you, Ant. I want a second lefty. Maybe TJ McFarland, but again, that's a minor league battle. We'll get to that later. But if we're just looking at Brooks by himself, it's an A for me.
This is the A+ move, and like Andrew, this is probably my favorite move out of the whole offseason. And, Anthony, I understand, he came from Tampa. Some people who, don't watch Tampa or don't watch, some of these guys, they don't regularly see them on a regular basis. This is just one of those guys who has been scouted as the breakout reliever. If he applies his stuff with the perfect system that he's around, he's going to be one of the best relievers in all of baseball. And last year, and I think coming into this year, this is in my opinion, he is the best lefty reliever in all of baseball. That's how talented he really is. One of the nastiest sliders you will ever see that can reach the RPM over 3,000. And I have been, I wouldn't say I've been clamoring for him, but I've been clamoring for a high-profile lefty, someone who can definitely do different things, whether it is managing contact or is striking guys out. And this guy has the potential to do it at an elite level. He has done it for a smallish sample. He has shown the potential to do that as well. So I'm very excited for him, and I wouldn't be surprised, if he does surprise a lot of Mets fans in the way Aaron Loup did, because Aaron Loup was, let's not forget, $3 million, $4 million. And we always are like, okay, well, we need a lefty, and that was it. This guy, okay. But, I wouldn't say he's going to have a historic Aaron Loup season, but I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a lot better than people think he's going to be. Now let's move to the big one. Jacob deGrom leaving. The Mets needed a replacement at the top of their rotation, and they signed quite the replacement. Justin Verlander to a 2-year, $86.6 million contract, including a year 3 vesting option, which will be worth $35 million if he pitches 140 innings in 2024. Verlander is 40 years old and coming off his 3rd Cy Young Award last season. First ballot Hall of Famer, 2-time World Series champion, the list goes on and on. Verlander is joining his old teammate from back in Detroit, Max Scherzer, forming the new 1-2 punch at the top of the Mets rotation.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. I mean, again, Justin Verlander, the player, is great. I still don't love replacing Jacob deGrom with him. I'm sorry. I still don't like the criteria the Mets took with him, because you have to keep in mind Verlander is an addition to the team, but you also have the subtraction of losing deGrom. So they kind of balance out in that regard. Anytime you're signing the Cy Young Award winner, you always got to like that. I mean, okay, this is the guy that was the best pitcher in the league. He's been in a lot of big moments, mixed results. I mean, we've seen him dominate the Yankees, but then we see him have struggles in the World Series against the Phillies. So there's definitely been a mixed bag there, but at least he's been there and has that experience and has pitched in those big games. But I still think that the concern of signing a 40-year-old starting pitcher, there's always just a lot of risk involved. I mean, we talk about giving relievers a lot of years. Anytime you sign anybody who's 40 years old, particularly a pitcher, that's a recipe for disaster. Verlander, he had a great year this year, but don't forget, he's just coming off of Tommy John surgery. So it's not that long ago where Justin Verlander missed an entire season due to injury. So there is that risk involved as well. And my thing is that, like, okay, you sign a 40-year-old starting pitcher. That's one thing. But you already have another guy in your rotation who's also about to be 40. So it's like, do you want to keep going to that well? Do you want to take that risk twice? You saw Max Scherzer have plenty of IL stints throughout the course of the season, and he's now a year older. So I'm not crazy that the Mets have continued to take this approach of going really old, really risky. So I'm even as an old guy, you think I'd give him, some bias, but I still think that losing deGrom, it equals to an A-. I mean, again, Verlander is a great player, but I think that no matter what, they were taking the same risk, giving deGrom 5 years versus giving Verlander 2 to 3 years, because deGrom in 5 years, he's closer to Verlander's age now. So I still think that no matter what, it was the same risk. You might as well keep the guy you already had. Now, is there some secret reasons that deGrom came and told Buck Showalter about? We talked about that before, not going to get into it. But I think if there was no other secret reasons, I think deGrom should have been still a Met, and then Verlander could have been somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, when the other guy goes, you got to replace him. And again, I would have preferred Carlos Rodon. I made this clear again, the age thing. I would have went 5 years for Rodon instead of 2 years for Verlander. But I've been, I guess, only of the guys on the podcast, I've been the most semi-positive towards this because it's 2 years and it lines up with that God-tier pitching free agency. So, hey, a bunch of money comes off and the God-tier pitching free agency, you can go out and add younger guys in their prime in those 2 years. But, I mean, again, there's not many better pitchers you could have replaced. Maybe Corbin Burns. Like, if you look at pitchers to replace Jacob deGrom, that list is, I'm not saying you're going to get Jacob deGrom because deGrom is 1 in a million, but also you get a chance of pitching 60 innings. Do I think Justin Verlander can probably give you more than 60 innings? I can make that bet. And I think he will give you, maybe the quality of those innings are probably less than deGrom, but were you willing to make the risk that Verlander can give you over 130, 150 innings, or Jake at 5 years? Who knows? So I give it a B+. I'm not, again, like Frank, I'm not in love. I would have went for Rodon for a little bit longer term with him being younger, but from a just pure perspective of replacing Jake, it was technically the best option if you're not including trades. So I'll give it a B+, but again, there's risk, but there's risk with every pitcher. They're one bad pitch away from Tommy John and they're done for the year. So you can make the case, Rodon, Verlander, trade for Corbin Burns. Every pitcher is one pitch away. So the guy with pedigree over the guy that was younger, the Mets decided that they were going for this 2-year window. It matches up with that, like I've continued to say, the big pitching class of 2025. Again, I'm not in love, but I could do it.
When this move happened, I hated it because, I was still consoling over the loss of Jacob deGrom. I mean, the guy I thought he was going to be a Met forever. And like that literally just like crushed me. But, speaking in baseball terms, the fact that these Mets were able to turn the corner within 72 hours and get probably the second best pitcher that's going to be out there in free agency. I mean, I got to give them an A just for that alone. I also like the fact that it's a short-term deal. I think they're thinking more into the future because at the time, we're still thinking about, are the Mets going to sign Brandon Nimmo? Are they going to sign Jeff McNeil? What's going to happen with Pete Alonso? Shohei Ohtani's out there in a couple of years. Manny Machado's out there. So giving these guys short-term deals, especially at the top of the rotation, I thought was a big move for the Mets. It was the right move instead of giving them 5 or 6 year deal, which they weren't going to get anyway. But the Mets were going to be the only ones that could give a short-term deal with that much money, unless I guess it was the Padres maybe. So I'm okay now with this deal. I'm still not too thrilled. Frank said it right with the age. I mean, if this was a 40-year-old pitcher as a 4th or 5th starter, fine. But we're talking about the 2 top starters are, a combined 80 years old now. And you're hoping and you're praying for the fact that these 2 guys are going to become Curt Schilling and Randy Johnson at the late end of their career and make that run what they did with the Arizona Diamondbacks. And it may happen, and most likely it probably might not happen. So, you can only hope that that's the way it works out, but it never really does. I just hope that Scherzer can stay healthy. We'll see what happens with Verlander. His arm might be fine because he had Tommy John surgery, but, the body starts breaking down now. That's been my biggest concerns.
I'm with you, Anthony, on this whole situation when Verlander signed. I mean, losing to DeGrom hurt. It really did. I mean, this is a guy who spent more than 8 years. I mean, just of his 8-year career, he was in the minors for a long time. He was in this organization for a long time. He developed as a Met, a 9th-round pick. I mean, this was a guy who, was a staple in the franchise. And I think that it was bold of them. I think it was a very hard decision to let him go. At the moment, I'm like, okay, you signed Justin Verlander. Okay, great. Great. Second best option, but I would have rather kept our own guy. Months later, I'm a lot better. I'm at peace with it now. Does it still hurt? Yes. Overall move, I give it an A because, this is a guy who has a huge history of pitching at the top of a rotation. He's had a phenomenal career, and maybe it does go south. Maybe it's possible that it does go south. I'm sure that we all remember that certain photo in 2007 that pretty much explains older pitchers when you need them. I won't bring up the sore subject. I apologize for that. It sucks that Jake's not here. It does suck that Jake's not here because I thought that he would be the exception, the guy that they keep forever, but they just, maybe they just didn't like his health. Maybe they just didn't like what was happening going forward. Does it feel hypocritical that they kind of go after Justin Verlander in that mix where he's had Tommy John surgery recently? I mean, there's nothing that you can really do about that now, and it's a 2-year deal. They have control over that 3rd year, I believe. So do I have some concerns with, him, regressing in Arsenal numbers, or do I think he's a little bit more home run prone than people think he is? Yes. But that's just my everyday concern with every single pitcher, so that's not really going to change. We just hope that he stays healthy, and that goes for Max Scherzer as well, and it's a risk that you take with every single pitcher. I would have taken the risk with number 48 going elsewhere, but that you can't really do anything about that. But overall, looking at Verlander separately, it's an A. Also, staying in the timeline of the winter meetings, the Mets left the building in San Diego with another lefty, this time adding it to the rotation. They signed Jose Quintana to a 2-year, $26 million deal. Quintana is 34 years old and coming off a breakout year split between Pittsburgh and St. Louis posting a 2.93 earned run average, a 2.99 fielding independent pitching, and striking out 20.2% of batters in 165.2 innings pitched. Quintana is currently slated into the Mets' veteran hefty rotation as their fourth starter.
Yeah, obviously this move is to replace Taijuan Walker in that, fourth slot, or I guess if you want to say fifth slot, if you want to put Carlos Carrasco fourth. I've always wanted to, like I said, in the bullpen with the lefty, I always wanted to have at least one lefty in the rotation. I just think it, changes things up a bit. The deal is, I don't know. I kind of find this like another short-term 2-year deal rather than giving what was Taijuan Walker 4 years, $72 million. He's going to, I don't know, in Philadelphia, that dude might get lit up. So I'm a little worried about him there. If he would have stayed with the Mets, I might have felt a little bit different because of our dimensions of the park. But in Philadelphia, that ball's going to fly. Every start that flew off of him in Philadelphia. So that's going to be tough for them. So I kind of like this 2-year deal for Quintana. And you kind of see this with the Mets, right? They're giving short-term deals to these starting pitchers. Back in the day, they would give a lot of money to the rotation. Santana, Tom Glavine. I mean, the names go on. And I finally feel like the Mets are kind of concentrating more on taking care of the position players because they play every day, and giving these pitchers short-term deals where maybe they'll re-sign them, or maybe they'll say, oh, thanks for, pitching the last couple of years, and then move on to somebody else, because there's always going to be starting pitching around. So, unless they start building from within, which they have a couple of guys that they could probably count on in that back end of the rotation, like a Tyler McGill or a David Peterson. I guess if you want to count Joey Lucchesi too, and Eliza Hernandez for a spot start. But, Jose Quintana, that I don't think this is a bad deal. He may not be, one of the better pitchers out there, but for 2 years, $26 million, and what the Mets needed in that rotation, some, a little stability, I think Quintana can, hold that down. I'm going to give that, I'll give that a B.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree here with a B, but I guess my biggest thing, he's taking over the Bassett role for me, because especially now, Senga's technically the number 3, but who's your guy you're going to need innings out of? You need your guy that Chris Bassett, yes, you had your star power at the top, but what was Chris Bassett going to be? He was the guaranteed guy. He's going to give you 6 innings every start. It might not be pretty sometimes, but you guaranteed, you write in a Chris Bassett start, 6 innings. And at times he goes 8, and there was some close calls. He tried to go for a complete game that Buck said no. Yes, he's going to fill in, like Ant said, the fourth spot that was previously held by the Taco Boy. But
All-star. And snubbed out of a second one. So just remember.
No.
Yeah. Yes.
No.
He had the RA to do it again.
The second half will always show if he actually deserved it. What was he doing in the second half?
It's still on the resume. It still happened.
That Whopper commercial, made for him.
Made for him, yes. Bassett gets a 3-year, $60 million deal with Toronto. Yes, it's more money. Quintana, I seeing him down in Missouri, seeing the Cardinal games. He did pitch well. I'll give him that. He pitched great down here. Him and Montgomery solidified that team to make the playoffs and win the division. But again, he's not a guy. He's a 5-and-fly guy. Like, he'll maybe get you into the 6th inning, but he's going to give you 5 quality innings, and then that's pretty much about it. And Bassett, again, gave you that ability. At times, he goes 8. He goes 7. And you look at his contract. Obviously, Quintana is making $13 a year. Okay, again, lining up, taking that money off. Again, I continue to go with that pitching class of 2025. Why not give $6 more million? Or $7 more million to Bassett to just, hey, and especially, which we'll get to in a second, the biggest question mark in that 3 spot, not only are you 90 years old at the top, your new number 3, you don't know how many innings he's going to pitch in the big leagues, how he's going to pitch in the big leagues, and if he can stay healthy in the big leagues. So I like Quintana, I gave it a B, but if I'm Billy Epler, why wouldn't I say, you know what, I need my 4 starter, because I got 3 question marks at the top. My number 4 guy, and Quintana can give you 5 guaranteed. Why not give me a guy like Bassett and pay a little more that you knew maybe he didn't like New York? You saw the comments in the playoffs that, maybe he didn't like pitching in New York, but he's the guy. For a majority of his season, was a workhorse and pitched well in New York. Why lose that for Quintana, who, again, we don't know, had the renaissance of St. Louis. Can he replicate that? And he's the type of pitcher that he's not going to give you – he'll give you innings, but he doesn't give you that, okay, random, and once a month, he'll give you 8 innings and save the bullpen. He's not that. So I gave it a B because I think he can be a very serviceable fourth starter. I just think I maybe would have paid a little bit more for Bassett for just the innings to know, okay, you got 3 question marks, but you know that 4 spot. One, he stays healthy, barring, him want to take, him getting COVID and still want to pitch him through that. But every time he was on the mound, you got 7 or more, 6 or 7 or more. With Quintana, he's a 5 and fly. It's more innings on the bullpen. So that's where maybe I would have paid more for Bassett, gave him that extra year with a little bit more money. But, Quintana is a very good pitcher. Gave it a B.
Yeah, Quintana, I've always found him to be such an interesting pitcher because when he first came up, he was a guy that was making things happen. He was off to a really good start in his career. He gets traded, and then he wasn't the same guy, and he really struggled. I mean, he went to Pittsburgh and was awful. Then he comes to the Cardinals and has a great year. So he's somebody where you're like, okay, well, which Quintana are we going to get? Are we going to get the one that was really good for the Cardinals? Or are we going to get the one that just before that was really struggling? Looked like he was kind of on his way out of the league. I mean, that's how bad things were getting from Quintana compared to where he started off at. So, and that part of it is a little risky because you are going for a guy that had, one big year, is coming off a great year. But the thing that does work in his favor, like Andrew's saying, as far as like innings eater is one thing. But what I like about Quintana is that he made 32 starts last year. That's really big. I mean, because we know with the uncertainty of the 80-year-olds at the top, you need somebody that's just going to be there every 5 days because we've talked about it so many times. We talk about it every week. The depth isn't great. So if there is a scenario where Scherzer is out, where Verlander is out, if you have another starting pitcher out, I don't know if the Mets could fill up 3 spots all in the span of like every 5 days. They have 3 guys they can rely on that are not already in the starting rotation. And with Carrasco, I mean, he's a ticking time bomb pretty much with injuries. So I like that it's a guy that is there every 5 days. But again, he is up there in age, 34 years old. So there is always a higher chance at injury. And you're just talking about wanting to keep Bassett, the guy that I always have my eye on. I'm still a sucker for Nathan Eovaldi. I mean, that's the guy I wanted. I think he's a guy that, playoff experience. He has injuries too, but, he's been in the big games. He's just gotten the job done, and he's had more than just one good year. I think when it comes to Quintana, because the Mets did not do much else this rotation, again, I've more and more I think very low of Carrasco this season. My expectations are very low for him. I think Carrasco is going to be the 5th starter, maybe out of the rotation. Tyler McGill might take his job. So right now, you're looking at Quintana is probably the number 4, which means that in a playoff series, Quintana will be making starts for you. So we like him. Do we like him enough to start him in playoff games? That's where I'm like, oh, that's kind of pushing it. I mean, you're really hoping you're getting that St. Louis version of him if that's the case, because I would rather have another guy who I'm like, okay, I know in a playoff series I could count on him. Quintana, it's like, we sure hope he's that St. Louis version, not the guy before that. So I gave him a B as well because of those risks.
Yeah, I also went with a B. I think that's a clean slate of Bs. I think that the only thing that I can ask for someone in the back end of the rotation is to keep the ball in the ballpark and keep it on the ground. And Taijuan Walker wasn't doing that, so it's a better move than that. I really think that they're going to rely a lot on him. And we said this in a video about who is going to be the number 5 starter, is the fact that if they were to go with Carlos Carrasco as their number 5, they're definitely going to be relying on Jose Quintana pitching 160, 170 innings. We talk about with the 5 starter, whether you want to see Quintana as a number 5 or something, can they be the number 3 if we need them to be? Can they be a number 2 if we need them to be with an older rotation at the top? I think he's sturdy. I think that if he does give us a 5 to 6 quality innings, I'm fine with that. Do I think he was the best guy on the market? Was he on my yes list? Definitely. I was definitely okay with that. Like Frank said, Eovaldi, I would have considered bringing back Bassett, but maybe there was just something where he just didn't want to come back. That's fine. Whatever. We all know that we always like to look for clues. Mets fans are nuts like that. They always have to have a reason to hate someone when they leave. Is he fantastic? No, but that's kind of just what you get from the back end of the rotation. What I'm seeing right here is he's better than Taijuan Walker.
Taijuan Walker was in a similar spot when he came to the Mets, and Jeremy Hefner got his hands on him and made him a better pitcher and got him that 4-year deal. I could see the same thing happening for Quintana, who probably has more talent than what Taijuan Walker has, I would think. And you look at 2020 and 2021, Quintana wasn't even starting. He was coming out of relief most of the time. You have him pitching in Chicago and you have him pitching in Los Angeles Angels. I mean, not the ideal situation until he got traded or until he went to, Pittsburgh and he went to St. Louis where, kind of little stabilized. He was guaranteed a starting rotation spot. So it kind of, got him to, he got to pitch more and he got more innings at him. So I think Quintana is a solid number 4, number 5 starter. I guess in case the Mets do somehow get someone else or try to make a trade. But I think for now, I wouldn't mind leaning on Quintana for a little bit, especially with Hefner leading the rotation there, getting these guys going.
Yeah, he's a big sinker guy. He's got his curveball. That's kind of just Hefner's type of thing. He loves the breaking balls and the sinkers. That's his thing. So I'm excited, to see what he can do with a lot of these arms, and we'll see what he can do with Jose Quintana and try and find some even more consistency that he had last year. Now, although he went to the Boris market, the Mets finally broke the hometown curse as they re-signed their center fielder Brandon Nimmo to an 8-year, $162 million contract. Since his debut in 2016, Brandon is 7th in on-base percentage and 18th in weighted runs created plus in all of the MLB. Nimmo is now 29 years old, returning to the team that drafted him back in 2011 as the 13th overall pick.
This is an A+ because we don't have Kevin Kiermaier playing center field. Like, it's that simple. Like, it's literally that simple. If we lived in a world where Brandon Nimmo signed with the Toronto Blue Jays and Kevin Kiermaier was playing center field for the New York Mets, I wouldn't have this beautiful mullet. I would not have hair. I would have probably lost 100 pounds. I would have looked like Chet Holmgren if Brandon Nimmo was not brought back. But, besides the point, 8-year deal. Now with the actual GM hat on, I hate the term. But again, I can be biased on one, have one little thing to say, you know what? He's the 4th highest paid center fielder. That's where he is in baseball. He's a top 5 center fielder. So he's, highest paid. You got Mike Trout. It's pretty good. George Springer probably moving to a corner now because of Kevin Kiermaier. But, quality of center fielder. He'd say he's better than Brandon Nimmo. Starling Marte, technically, the Spot Track has him there. But, better than Marte. And then there's Nim. Then Buxton right behind him. Maybe you make the argument Buxton's better than Nimmo. Have that conversation if you want. But he's a top 5 guy. And he's getting paid as a top 5 guy. Scott Boras did his job. 8 years? Okay, but AAV is more what I care about, and it's $20 million for a guy who's going to be a 5-win player and has progressively gotten better. Maybe we finally see that power stroke. Maybe we see this year him run more, because guess what? He's got paid now. Maybe you start to see that stolen bases that a certain person won't ever shut up about, where 2022 stolen bases don't matter, but maybe we see a little speed. Maybe you get that 20 steal. Maybe a nice little 2020 season, but who knows? Now he's paid. Now he can run, but obviously, as the Nimmo simp, and knowing him, I can't wait for Kansas City. We'll get a nice little barbecue meal together, which I'm connecting with him. Go a nice little meal in Kansas City. But as a player, again, Kevin Kiermaier is not in center field for the Mets, and we wouldn't have had to go for another graveyard pick. A borderline all-star center fielder, one of the best guys out there. Term I don't love. The AAV's fine. It's an A+.
Yeah, as far as Nimmo, look, I agree with Andrew that, yes, I mean, Kevin Kiermaier would have been just a complete disaster, or some of the other free agents that were out there. But I still think I would have liked seeing the Mets try to get a little more creative and just try something new. I mean, we've talked about it so many times. Shake up the core, add some new bats, add some new faces. I think that the offense is what let them down in the big games in San Diego because of the kind of style players that they have. And I think that Brandon Nimmo is just the prototypical what the Mets already have in this lineup. Draw your walks, station to station baseball, not really having much happening. He does have those flaws. He ain't throwing anybody out in the outfield. He's standing on the warning track, so those bloops fall in front of him. He's not stealing bases. And because he's not stealing bases, he isn't giving that threat of running so that it doesn't make pitchers think twice. If you ever batted Pete Alonso second, which I mean they should, but if you ever did, if you had the threat of Nimmo running, it would make Pete Alonso perform even better because pitchers would be more susceptible to mistakes. But he doesn't do that either. He's just here with his 50% ground ball rate, which, like, when other players do it, it's a big problem. But when Nimmo does it, 50% ground balls, and he gets a bunch of ground ball hits, it's okay when Nimmo does it because he's Brandon Nimmo and he could do no wrong. I still am in the Brian Reynolds camp. I'm still in the Ian Happ market. I mean, even the fact that Mets were considering Trey Turner and trying to be creative, like, at least it was something new. I understand the rest of the market wasn't great, but a guy with this injury history, 8 years, oof. I mean, I think with Nimmo, and again, I think when you have the payroll the Mets have right now, and you spend the amount of money the Mets have, and they were going to spend more had they signed Correa, even while having Nimmo already signed, AAV goes out the window. I mean, they're spending so much freaking money. The money doesn't matter. The years do. I don't want a guy that's here for 8 years or 7 years just because he's getting paid a good amount of money, but he ain't that good anymore. Just because I got to save a few bucks here and there when I got the original order baseball and this insane payroll, why would I, hurt myself down the road? So I'll give it an A-, but I still would have liked to see the Mets try something new.
Too many of the same guy, you say.
Right. Yeah.
Too many of the same guy of what?
Of a guy that his goal is to draw walks. First pitch, let me take it. Men on base, let me take it. I'm not going to try to drive runs in. I'm just looking to have a really good on base percentage. Yay! I could just get on first base and just stand.
So you want more power, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Jeff McNeil, your buddy.
He's not a free agent. Didn't sign for 8 years. Not a free agent. It's the same thing I told you. It's the same thing I told you Conforto. He's not a free agent. When he's a free agent, you have the decision to keep him or not. You could get someone new. McNeil's already here. McNeil does more. McNeil plays infield, plays outfield. And he's a guy that wins a batting title. Like, that's more valuable than just drawing some walks. Jeff McNeil is a guy who doesn't get hurt and actually tries to steal a base and actually tries to do stuff and doesn't have flaws defensively.
Brandon Nimmo doesn't have any flaws defensively anymore.
He's got a noodle arm and stands on the warning track. All those bloops that fall in front of him.
Would you like to put Jeff McNeil in center field as well?
No, I'm not putting Jeff McNeil in center field.
Okay, exactly.
He's a second baseman that doesn't need to stand next to Starling Marte. He doesn't need to stand on second base to be a good defender.
Yeah, because he refused to do it and got choked out by Lindor for not doing it.
One last thing before we let Ant have a sensible argument, because I'm going to go with Frank here.
Yeah.
You're Mr. wanting Brian Reynolds. That's who you want? But
Yes.
You're also a Francisco Alvarez simp. You're not getting one without the other. So you want to trade Alvarez for Reynolds? That's what's going to cost. That's what you want?
Listen.
Or you
Has
just want
Brian
cash?
Reynolds, hear me out. Has Brian Reynolds been traded yet?
No, but again, that's what
No,
the asking
because
price
the
is.
Pirates are idiots.
Yep.
Nobody's giving them what they're asking. So the Pirates, they're just going to be like, okay, we're just going to be dumb. Like, the Mets shouldn't have to give up Alvarez. The Pirates should wake up. Same thing with the Cubs. The Cubs are one of the dumbest organizations out there right now. But the Cubs, they should be willing to move on from these guys because these teams stink. Move on, get some talent back, and don't just hold on too long. Lose the value that you could have gotten, but you could have got something. And then you just end up with, okay, we got a couple of decent prospects.
First of all, you got to stop sleeping on the Pirates. They signed Dick Mountain. They're going to the World Series. End of story.
Facts.
Anthony, what would you grade this?
I have to give it an A considering the circumstances. You had only two options out in center field, and it was Brandon Nimmo and Aaron Judge. And if they weren't going the Aaron Judge route, I mean, you had to sign Brandon Nimmo. What he provides, I mean, obviously he does walk a lot. You'd like to see him steal more bases. Maybe we'll see that with the new rule changes that are going on. Maybe he'll be able to, procure some stealing of some bases and help out the team. Maybe Buck Showalter can, how he likes to learn the rules and skew the rules. Maybe he'll figure out a way to get Nimmo on base and start running. I'd like to see a little bit more power from Brandon Nimmo come this season. If he could, hit, 20 home runs, 22 home runs. I think that's a positive for him. He's not going to be the RBI guy because he's at the top of the lineup. I think when he does get the opportunity, though, I think he has come through a lot of the times trying to, help the Mets score some runs. So I don't see him as a center fielder for this entire length of the contract. I think eventually he moves to left field, and they, I don't know if Alex Ramirez from the minors, I don't know if he's a center fielder or what. I do think they eventually get a center fielder, but if you didn't get Brandon Nimmo, the odds are Tommy Pham was probably going to be the starting center fielder come this year. And people already hate the fact that he's backing up. So Brandon Nimmo was a must-do. I mean, he loves playing here. I know you wanted to shake things up, but a lot of the times too, you want to keep these players around, especially the players that want to play here and the players that do play good here. And he may not be the superstar, and maybe he got more superstarish type money, but Brandon Nimmo's a pretty dang good player, and I'm okay with this deal. I know the length seems very long, but I do think that eventually he moves out of center field into left field.
It's an A+ move for me because I think it's just when you look at the options. I mean, what were you going to do? You were going to take a risk on Cody Bellinger? Were you going to trade for Dalton Varsho? Trading assets, which we all know the Mets didn't want to do. We all knew that, Brian Reynolds, of course, he was out there. Ian Happ, maybe he eventually gets traded. I mean, at this point, there was no options there. To tell you the truth, this lineup is not what it is without Brandon Nimmo in it. He is a lot more valuable than a Jeff McNeil or a Eduardo Escobar. 100%, I can tell you right now. He got what he deserved on the market. $20 million a year. Do I like the term? No, I don't with his health. Obviously. But Brandon Nimmo is a extremely, extremely important member of this lineup. I understand they have all of these types of leadoff hitters here, but Brandon Nimmo is the guy that you need at the top of your lineup. You're not going to find another type of hitter like that. Not to mention, like Mr. Franklin said all the time, do not take a player's ability to play in New York for granted. But again, that doesn't apply to Brandon Nimmo, does it?
But do you not? But you always say, don't you? You've been saying for years they should change it up. Haven't you said that?
I said they should blow up all of these pieces that don't work. Brandon Nimmo works.
So then who goes?
I'd move Vogelbach. I'd move Ruff. I would move Escobar. I'd move Vientos. Vientos should have been moved years ago. All the guys that lack the versatility, basically.
You'd keep Canna?
I think Canna is a platoon player. I think the big problem with the lineup was that the bottom third was basically Death Valley with a catcher who you couldn't even beg to hit 220. And now, maybe, Tomas Nido will probably hit 215, 220 and, get the occasional base, big time hit. I do think, and we'll probably get to him a little later, but, the Omar Narvaez thing, that's going to become a big move, whether it's to help this team or to help Francisco Alvarez, which I'm pretty sure we'll get into later. But I think outside of, that bottom third of the lineup, if you want to include Eduardo Escobar, none of the other guys I would not get rid of. But that's just me. Maybe Mark Canha falls into that because I don't find that he is a starting outfielder. I think if you platoon him with somebody, I think it would work better. You start to see that towards the later half of the season in August when he had when he was kind of taking over for the Mets and they had that big win in Philly and he had a big game against the Dodgers. So, maybe he's the one that I would, maybe replace, but he might have a big season himself coming up. So I don't know. If it wasn't the bottom three and, Darren Ruff, I don't know who you could probably replace.
I don't know. I see a lot of the same lineup. I think that 162 million, you could use it maybe for a new face, a guy that could hit for some power.
Who in this market, and this is the other thing, who in this market at that price tag? Who?
I still don't get why you can't just give the money to Aaron Judge. I don't get why they had to have a secret and you're not allowed to bid on this player. Why?
Here's the deal with Aaron Judge. He wasn't coming here. It was never going to happen. Judge was not going to be a Met. It wasn't going to happen. Even if you have these collusion things with Steve Cohen and Steinbrenner, which was just nuts, Judge was not going to be a Met. It was never going to happen, no matter how much Cohen throw at him.
You definitely have this kind of aura around these big players that play for the Yankees. They usually never leave. Whereas, let's say if it was the other shoe, like Aaron Judge was a Met and he was offered to go to the Yankees, I think he would go. The Mets aren't at that point where they're like, these guys are just going to come here. I think that there still needs to be some time before something like that happens. And the Yankees, they still have that. Or, hey, I said, either Brandon Nimmo or Aaron Judge was the move. They couldn't get Aaron Judge, so you had to go with Brandon. And obviously he got the big contract also because his agent was, Scott Boras, so that they were going to get the most out of that. So, but this, as bad as this, I don't want to say as bad as this lineup was, but with that bottom third of the lineup, this team still won 101 games. So, I mean, they just needed to add another piece
Listen,
to
still
the
have
lineup.
they still have the same team, and I'll tell you what, Trey Turner is going to kick the Mets' butt much worse than if Brandon Nimmo was a Philly drawing walks and then just standing there. I think Trey Turner is going to hurt the Mets a lot more than Brandon Nimmo.
But Trey Turner's going to play shortstop.
But
He's
the
not going
Mets,
to play
the
center
Mets
field.
discussed moving him to center field.
But he wants to play shortstop. The Mets discussed.
Money talks.
The
He'll-
Mets
he'll
discussed that
move.
he wanted to play center field, but that doesn't mean he wanted to. If he could play and get more money to play shortstop, he's going to take that.
And that's the other thing, I guess, with this offseason and I guess what the future offseason, especially what Manny Machado just said, years aren't going to matter anymore. Because if you saw Nightingale, Manny wants 10 years, 400. So you're not buying. It's going back to the term that GMs are saying, you know what? 10-year deals, lower AAV, they don't care anymore. They don't care that back half. If your prime is now and you're in a winning culture now, that's what they're caring about. And did Nimmo deserve an 8-year deal? No. But that's what the market is telling you. Any all-star caliber player or close to it is going to get term now. So that's now what the market, if Bogarts is getting 10, Trey got 10, all these guys getting 10-year deals, we're going back to the old school where, hey, you're buying for those first 4 or 5, and God help you with the rest of that deal.
I don't think Nimmo is as replaceable as people think he is. But that's just me talking, but that's it. But I'm glad he's here. I am thrilled that we did not have to see a Kevin Kiermaier or Bradley Zimmer or whatever the hell they had cooking up in the minor leagues or whatever the hell that was, Abraham Almonte in center field every day. So I'm glad that he's here. Was it an overpay? Yes, sometimes you just have to overpay. You're never going to find the perfect value, especially with these position players getting as much as they do.
Yeah, and he's 29 years old. If he was like 30, 31, 32, I think I would be more in line with Frank on that, that situation. But, he's still young.
All right, so now less than 5 minutes after the Nimmo deal was announced, the Mets also continue to add to the bullpen, signing David Robertson to a 1-year, $10 million contract. Robertson is now 38 years old, coming off a great season, posting a 2.40 earned run average, a 3.58 fielding independent pitching, striking out 30.7% of batters in 63.2 innings pitched. Now, as big part of the 2009 Yankees World Series team, Robinson returns for his third stint in New York, this time for the team in Queens.
Yeah, I give this deal an A. The Mets needed relief. This was right before they were even able to secure Adam Ottavino to his deal. 1 year, $10 million for a reliever. This is what I'm pretty sure Andrew's talking about, giving relievers long deals. This is a perfect deal. 1 year, $10 million. Obviously, how old is he? He's going to be 38 years old. 2.70 ERA. Every time he's pitched in New York, he's pitched very well, which, fingers crossed he does here at Citi Field as well. And he's it's going to be a nice little balance between him, Brooks Raley, and Adam Ottavino, taking turns being that setup guy. Each one of them could do it, and probably each one of them could close a game if possible. I'm pretty sure Robertson has had plenty of times to close games out, and I like this deal. I wanted him at the trade deadline. I understood that the Mets weren't going to give away any prospects for him. So I guess the fact that we got him now, this is kind of like the whole I wanted Andrew Chafin thing. So we got Robertson. I'm good with this deal. I got to give it an A.
I mean, I've wanted David Robertson since he was first a free agent a few years ago. I've always wanted him as a Met. I always thought he was a great fit. Like we talked about the success with New York, but it wasn't even that. It's also that the Yankees put him in plenty of high leverage situations. Even if it wasn't closing games, it was like 8th inning, bases loaded, or 7th inning, tight game. And a lot of the times, David Robertson was coming through, and that's what I like out of relievers. I like that versatility. I like a guy that can come in with runners on in any inning. He doesn't need to have a clean inning and need to face only right-handed batters and needs all this criteria just to be successful. I like that David Robertson, he's gotten plenty of closing opportunities. So he's a guy that he's just been there and done that, and that it's a 1-year deal. Because when we get to Ottavino, that's not a 1-year deal. So the fact they got him for 1 year, I'm really happy about that. The only thing I don't like, the age. I mean, like I said, Robertson should have been a Met multiple times before. The fact that we have to wait till this guy's almost 38 to get him is a little concerning. So, again, you always have that risk of can he stay healthy when you do get to that almost 38 years old. So that brings it down to A-. But I've loved Robertson for a long time. I'm glad the Mets decided to really focus on the bullpen this time around and just have multiple guys that can get the job done. Because when Diaz finally gets a day off, you could actually go to David Robertson in the doubleheader game and not go to Yohan Lopez, not go to Drew Smith and Joely Rodriguez and all the other bums. At least you have another guy.
Again, I gave it a B+. Again, I liked it a lot more after they brought in Adam Ottavino. Like you said, that the fact he's not the only high leverage role. When he originally came out, we thought, okay, this was the Adam Ottavino replacement. No, then weeks later, Otto's back. It makes me like this deal a lot more. Now that you have 4 guys in high leverage that you trust, and not just 2, because, again, we don't have to depend on Seth Lugo and Trevor May to close out a game when Edwin Diaz isn't available in that B-team role. Now you've got guys like David Robertson and Raley or Otto, whoever pitches well at the time. You give Buck other options. Like you said, so Drew Smith doesn't have to show up, or Yohan Lopez or RJ Alvarez comes into a game in high leverage. You have higher quality of guys at the back end of your pen. And in making Drew Smith and the plethora of young arms that third group of relievers you can use in high leverage, and I do think it's better. But again, David Robertson, the vet, pitched what he's, again, big thing, pitching in New York. It's a lot harder to pitch for the Yankees than it is for the Mets. Sadly to say on a Mets podcast, it's way harder to pitch in World Series games with the Yankees than it is to pitch with the Mets. So having that pedigree, pitching in New York, walks a little bit of guys, which not in love with, but Hefner did fix Adam Ottavino, so maybe he can do it with David. Good hard knuckle curve. I'm fine with this. If he's a 7th inning guy, you really can't be mad. And then, like Frank said, in a doubleheader, you have really 4 closers if you want. And worst case, you make Diaz the game 1 closer, and then you can use Robertson or Ottavino to be that second guy and have 2 other guys you can use. So it's a B+ for me.
I'm also going to give this a B+. I have my concerns, and I think we've all kind of just all explained them so far. Age, that's just going to be my concern for a while. That's just how it is. 1-year deal. Again, if he sucks, move on, whatever. The walks have to be fixed, or I'm going to go apeshit. But other than that, I mean, he has experience. He's done this before. Has playoff experience. He's done, a lot of things. He's had a very long career, and he's had a lot of success. And I'm okay with the move. Would have been my first choice? Probably not, but I think that it was an addition that they definitely needed. Someone that could back up Diaz, and they basically tripled the possibilities of guys who can back up Diaz now. Keeps the ball on the ground. Hopefully he can keep the ball in the ballpark with the Citi Field dimensions, and that's all I'm hoping for. I can't give it an A. Frank About Sports likes him, and by law, I'm not allowed to like something that Frank About Sports likes. Let's get to the most enticing addition this offseason from Japan. The Mets signed Japanese flamethrower Kodai Senga to a 5-year, $75 million contract. Senga is now 30 years old and spent 11 years in Japan for the SoftBank Hawks. He has been scouted to have an explosive fastball that can reach 100 to 101 miles an hour, but his main weapon is his signature ghost fork that disappears over the lower half of the plate. Now, Senga's deal includes player options after both year 4 and year 5 if he pitches over 400 innings in that span of the first 3 years, and a year 6 vesting option that kicks in if he were to undergo Tommy John surgery. Senga is expected to be the Mets' number 3 starting pitcher in the rotation behind the Hall of Famers themselves, Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer.
Yeah, he's a really weird one. I mean, because there is potential there, because we heard great things about how he performed in Japan, but there is always that risk of how is it going to translate. I mean, not everybody that was really good in another country comes here and does the same thing. I mean, some do, but then some don't. So there always is that risk involved. I mean, I always lean more towards the guy who did it in the majors, did it in America. I always lean more that way. But I think that we're hearing, oh, he throws 101, but then we're seeing 96. I'm like, okay, well, that was a lie. So, I mean,
it's the first bullpen of the year, and he's hitting 96. Well, he's not throwing 100 the first day of spring training. Get him out of here.
Until he throws 100, his grade's going to stay where it is. It's
when Lindor struck out versus Jacob DeGrom last year, I was very concerned.
When he fell down looking like a fool, yes, it was concerning.
Pete Alonso trips over his shoelaces every freaking day. What?
The fact that he is replacing Chris Bassett, who was, like we said, that durable Iron Man number 3 pitcher, occasionally aced when the other 2 guys got hurt. Those are tough shoes for Kodai Senga to fill in. I mean, this is a guy that, I'm sure he had pressure games in Japan, but it isn't the postseason. It isn't like a really close series. It isn't an elimination game where you really need the guy to come through. He hasn't been in that spotlight yet. So I just think that we could hear about he has a ghost pitch. It's like, okay, maybe. I mean, will it disappear against Bryce Harper and Acuna and these guys? I hope so. But again, we don't know that yet. So I think there's just so much uncertainty that, I'm going to put it as a B. I like the AAV, but the fact that's okay, well, if he isn't that great, you're going to have him for 5 years. But if he is really good, you'll have him for 3 years. So even his contract is very weird. So he just has so many different things going for him and against him that I just leave it at him.
Hey, I'm going to have this deal at either a B, getting close to a B minus. This is the one that worries me the most out of all the signings that they have done. Andrew brought it up. I really wanted Chris Bassett back. I know he had those 2 very bad starts that kind of derailed everything. I don't know if he hated New York or if the media had got to him. I don't know what the situation is, but that dude held the rotation down without Scherzer, without DeGrom. He held this rotation down. He pitched the innings. That's something that the Mets seem to lose, is not getting guys who pitch innings. Even if it's a 4th or 5th starter, someone needs to eat the innings because of all these injuries. That's why a guy like Bartolo Colon helped out in those early years with those kids, because even when they were getting hurt, this guy was still tossing innings. Maybe he got lit up. Maybe he had a great game, but he was limiting the bullpen from having to come in and get tired. So the Mets needed someone to pitch innings. I don't know if Kodai's going to do that. I hope he does. I mean, the hope is he could be like a Masahiro Tanaka. And even, Tanaka wasn't the greatest, pitcher to come out of, Japan. So you can only hope that he pitches well. It's the unknown that freaks me out. And Frank said it too. The unknown of, will this guy be able to translate? There was even talk about the balls being different and the mound is different. I mean, this guy is going to have to adjust quickly. So hopefully he can do it. But I was a proponent of bringing Chris Bassett back. So that's why I am. Even if they didn't bring Jake back and they brought Bassett back, I think I would have been okay. Because, obviously they replaced it with Verlander. Replacing Bassett with Kodai Senga, we honestly don't know what we're getting. So we hope it works out. And, I really want to see him succeed. He's going to be under 2 of the best pitchers in baseball to help him out. So hopefully it works out.
All right, so I'll do something that the fans have yelled at us about. I'm going to be the positive one here. And we need some positivity because we're all negative Nancy's over here. And I'm going to look at this as, hey, he becomes the next Daisuke Matsuzaka, and this is a 3-year, $45 million deal. And it's all great, and who knows? Let's get back into reality. Yeah, I think the B is what you can really see. I mean, again, we don't know. And you can watch as much film and be watch how many games he pitches. It's not the same talent. It's a different ball. It is true. There's a bigger ball and smaller ball in Japan. Different art. So he has to take this adjustment. That's why spring training. And I love that he said, you know what? I could have played in the WBC, but I'm not. I'm going to stay in camp to get over and learn throwing with the new baseball, throwing off the new slope and mound and all that. I said it when they signed him. Yes, I'm with Ant. I wanted Bassett back, especially now with the 40-year-old AARP guys at the top. And Senga you traded quantity of innings for potential quality in Senga, which you don't know what Kodai Senga is. He could be the next Masahiro Tanaka, Daisuke Matsuzaka, or he's another version of Yusei Kikuchi, and we just waited 2 years to get our version. So there's the biggest unknown. Nobody knows. Even you and all these people being like, "Oh, you're guaranteed." The Ghost Fork looks cool now. He's striking out, making Pete Alonso and Brett Beatty whiff. That's not that hard to do. So we'll see. We'll see in the spring training games. Yes, those games are going to mean more because we want to see how he goes up against, even if it's the Nationals lineup, how his pitches and how he faces big league hitters. And that's the biggest thing. We need to look out for spring training. But it's a risk. Again, it's another risk. It's what they don't love. Give me those high floor guys. No, they want the high floors or no high. I want the high floor guys. They want the low floors, but who knows what could happen. So I'll give it a B. But again, there is concern changing, coming over from a new country. I'll give it a B.
All right, well, I'm going to go lower than all of you, and I'm going to give him neutral with a C, because I don't know what the hell this guy's going to be at all. And that's the thing. I don't know, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I do know at all. Watched as much as I could about this guy and looked and studied up or whatever, but I don't know what he's going to be at the major league level at all. I'm excited to see what this kid can do. He's not really a kid. He's 30 years old now, but I'm excited to see what he can do. It's definitely going to be quite the sight at spring training, and I'm excited, even though it is kind of funny because we have two of the greatest pitchers of all time on our staff, and the biggest spotlight will be turned on to Kodai Senga. So, high risk, but there's high reward if he does turn out to be it. They say that there are days where, faith is restored. When peace on earth is going to be declared, when world hunger is solved, or when James McCann is shipped to Baltimore to rot like the loser he's always been. But nonetheless, the Mets need an upgraded catcher to also mentor their top catching prospect, Francisco Alvarez. The Mets signed Omar Narvaez to a 2-year, $15 million contract, earning him $8 million this season, and it includes a $7 million player option for 2024. Narvaez is one of the best defensive catchers in baseball, coming off quite the down year offensively in 2022, but he is 31 years old now and joins Tomas Nido as the projected catching tandem for 2023 opening day.
I'm going to give him a B-. He will be better than James McCann, and that's just kind of the bar low. And the fact that I think if he does turn back to somewhat of offensively and is back to being the best defensive catcher, I think Tomas Nido gets flipped, and I think next year's tandem will be Francisco Alvarez and Omar Narvaez as the catching platoon. Not platoon, but he will become Alvarez's backup. And B, because, again, they did buy out his arbitration. They didn't give him an extension. No, they just bought out his last 2 arbitration years. Giving the set value for Tomas Nido is a lot more appealing to other teams to want to go out and sign or trade for him because, hey, if he has a rare outlier season where he hits, he did win a batting title in Double-A, so he has that ability to be an offensive catcher. What your number is for Nido is very appealing, and being one of the best defensive catchers in the game. I do think ending up, Nido could be potentially flipped, and Narvaez and Alvarez could be the platoon next year with Alvarez as the starter. I do think there's a little more offensive upside. Again, he can't be worse than James McCann. I know it. Again, would you have liked to seen Alvarez day one? Yes, his defense isn't there. So his job is to, 1, work at spring training to improve that, and then just be a better offensive catcher than James McCann, which is not very hard to do. So it is an upgrade. And like you said, including Nido to an extent, him getting flipped, it would be probably he will be the backup next year to Francisco Alvarez. So I'll give it a B-. Is he amazing player? No, but we're talking about the catching position. They all suck besides like 2 of them.
I mean, yeah, I think this is the first time I've really discussed Omar Narvaez and the Mets acquiring him on this channel. It's not something I normally talk about, but no matter how many things you want to give me, Omar Narvaez that, I still don't love it. I've said it every single year. I'm tired of the lack of offense at catcher. I just think that, you get rid of McCann. Okay, the reason why the Mets got rid of McCann, not only because he was bad, but also the money he was getting paid. And the Mets, they ended up still paying most of it. And then they said, let's add more money on top by also signing Omar Narvaez. So instead of allocating that money to actually upgrade the lineup and get like a quality DH that isn't Tommy Pham, no, we're just going to get yet another catcher. So Francisco Alvarez is my favorite prospect. And if you're someone who delays Francisco Alvarez, you're in his way, you're an enemy of mine. So I'm not a fan of that. I think that, Tomas Nido was the starting catcher. Great defensive catcher. Great baseball savant page, all this other stuff. I feel like Omar Narvaez is just too similar to Tomas Nido. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Okay, he had an all-star year 1 year. Great. So did James McCann. I always say what I count on is most recent success. And most recently, Omar Narvaez has not been successful offensively. So you still have that same problem in the lineup of the catcher not being a quality hitter. So I've Tomas Nido, if you're going to have a defensive catcher starting anyway, I would rather just have Tomas Nido stay as a starter, have Alvarez be the backup. This way he can't completely destroy with his defense. He'll just play every now and then, hit a bunch of home runs, get quality major league experience, because getting experience in the major leagues is better than getting experience in the minor leagues. So I would have rather have that. And then what I hate the most about this deal is it's a 2-year deal. So it's like, okay, well, maybe this year you want Alvarez to still learn and be in the minor leagues over. But what about next year? Why would I be paying $7 million to a backup catcher who can't hit? I just don't understand how that's a good use of assets, how that's a good use of asset management when, again, you could use that $7 million for other things you need, like actual starting pitching depth, maybe some more bullpen, guys who could actually hit the ball, just to have a backup catcher who could play good defense when I bought out Nito's arbitration years. So, again, if I have that same player already, why not have that at a cheaper cost next year as well? So for me, it's a C+ because I don't like the 2-year aspect of it.
It's crazy to think, with the rich history that the Mets have had at catcher, that we haven't had a good catcher in over a decade and a half, when it was Piazza, and the transition into LaDuca was probably the really last good catcher that we had those 2 years that we had him. Yeah, this deal, I'm going to give this, a B- into a C. I would give it an A+ just because we got James McCann off the roster. But, he's really here to help Francisco Alvarez. I don't know how long that's going to go. I don't know where that ends with Tomas Nido. Billy Epler said the other day that he's not going to be putting Francisco Alvarez just at DH, so he wants him to learn to catch. That's a big point that he made during his press conference. He said a lot of good stuff, or a lot of important stuff, the other day, and that was one of them. All I wanted James McCann to do was hit like 220, just something. At least Omar Narvaez, he had 2 bad years. Obviously, last year he was injured, and 2020, the shortened season. But besides that, he hasn't hit under 266. I mean, could you imagine if James McCann did that? We wouldn't be having this conversation if he did just that. But it is what it is. I don't know how this whole situation is going to pan out with Francisco Alvarez and Nido. Maybe Andrew is right. Maybe Nido gets shipped off or something. But then, obviously Frank too mentioning about paying a backup catcher $10 million. There's a whole lot of situations that could come out of this. But, just the fact that they were able to, get McCann out of here, which was, dead weight at the bottom of the order. It was just killing this offense. Couldn't get anything out of him. I don't know if it was you, Carson, who made the double play video. Someone made a video of just all his double plays. Was that you? That wasn't you? Or maybe you tweeted it out. I don't know. Someone made a video of just him hitting into 100 double plays for the Mets. At least we won't have to deal with that. So I gave it a, B- C, just for the fact that we were able to get, James McCann out of here.
Frank, as much as you love Francisco Alvarez and dream about him, think about him all the time, he's 21 years old.
And at 21 years old, he's still a better hitter than all these bums they've had, like Andy said, for the past decade.
You don't know that, though. You don't know that. And again, Frank, as much as you want to see Francisco Alvarez, and I want to see him too, this is not the position you want to mess with development. It is not. And especially with the entire ground that is being set by Billy Epler of saying that he wants to have him as a catcher. He's going to have to play AAA baseball. It's going to have to happen. And he's going to have to begin the season there. Unless he does something magnificent and shows off all 5 tools, even steals a few bags in spring training, which is not going to happen at all. He's going to probably start in AAA, and it's the right decision. This is not a position you want to mess with. I also looked up a list. I forget what it was. It was like a last week. I don't know. I forget. It was something like the youngest catchers to debut. I can tell you right now, every single one of those who are 23 or younger when they debuted, There's not much star power there. I can tell you right now. Now, as for Omar Narvaez, I give it a B. One of my favorite catchers in the game going into last year. Obviously, slumped offensively last year, was banged up, whatever. I'm also going to tell you right now, Frank, that he's not a backup catcher. He's a starting caliber catcher.
Next year, he's a 2-year contract. Is he going to be starting?
I don't care what he does next year. I don't care what he does next year. Don't care what he does next year. I care about right now. He is not a backup catcher. He's a starting caliber catcher. Last year, banged up. Other worst season, 2020. Who gives a living shit? Offensively, he's been a solid offensive catcher overall in his career. Defense, he's gotten so much better throughout his entire career. He's one of the best in the game now. He's a starting caliber catcher. He's definitely not Tomas Nido. Do I think that Narvaez is going to be a great offensive asset? I don't know. I can't really tell. You can never really tell with catchers. But as for compared to Tomas Nido or compared to what Omar Narvaez did last year, I definitely think he will be better than that. I think he projects well. I think that the position that they put him in is a good one. Connecting with Francisco Alvarez and helping him turn into the star that we hope that he is, I think this is the right move. Even though I would love to see Francisco Alvarez and bring all the kids up and have them sink and swim because it's an old team and all their old farts over 40 years old, this is a position you don't want to mess with. And I understand he can hit. Great. The bat's major league ready. We know it is. It's a position overall you don't want to mess with development. I think it's the right move. I have criticized Epler a lot. There's some things I like about him, some things that I don't like about him, but this certain move I'm 100% behind. So with Diaz, Raley, and Robertson, the Mets continued to bolster the bullpen by bringing back Adam Ottavino on a 2-year, $14.5 million contract that includes a year 2 player option worth over $6.5 million. Ottavino was fantastic in the setup role for the Mets last season, posting a 2.06 earned run average, a 2.85 fielding independent pitching, striking out 30.6% of batters in 65.2 innings pitched. Otto is now 37 years old and is now entering his 13th year in the major leagues.
Man, how underrated was Adam Ottavino last season? I didn't think we were getting that season from him. I know he pitched in New York with the Yankees. I mean, he's pitched in Boston, obviously Colorado. I didn't think we were going to get that season out of Adam Ottavino. I give this deal a B+. With, there is a little caution for me because of this rule change that's going on with trying to pick off batters, the pitch clock. I think he's affected the most by all these different rule changes. I mean, you can only pick off so many times, the throw over to first. He's got such a slow delivery. How's the pitch count, the pitch clock going to affect him? So I am a little bit concerned on that end, but the years and the number I'm good with. So I give him a B+.
I know he was one that I really, when the Mets first got him, I wasn't too crazy. I was like, wow, there's a guy that he's really been struggling lately. He's had his command issues. I was like, this stuff, and he's up there in age. So I was like, this definitely could be a risky one. But then he put together a great season. I was like, wow, that was a pleasant surprise. But I was hoping, I mean, he had such a great season that I find it hard for him to replicate or top it, that I was afraid that if the Mets do bring him back, it was going to be an Aaron Loop situation where he wasn't going to be as good and have that same magic. And then they went one step further by giving him a multi-year deal. And that's when I was like, oof. I mean, maybe he has another good year. I still don't think he'll be nearly as good as he was this past year. But then that extra year, I'm like, wow, that's really pushing it. Like, you already got Raley, you already got Robertson. I'm like, did you have to give him that extra year just to get him for this year? I mean, like, I don't think he's worth it as much now. He doesn't have the same amount of value because he isn't your other only reliable reliever. I would have maybe looked at somebody else who's a little younger that I could have got for the 1-year deal. But I think he still will be a quality pitcher. So I'm trying to, what I have him at? I had him at a B because I know he'll be quality, but I still think that he isn't going to be quite as good. And then that second year with the injury stuff, but just with age, I'm like, I don't really know how I feel about that second.
Yeah, I gave it a B. Not loving the second year, but I think I've said this on last week's pod. He's not a guy who needs velocity. As long as that slider's spinning, I feel like he could be like Oliver Perez. He could pitch till he's 45 and still be somewhat effective as long as that slider is still moving. So, again, $7 million both years. I'm okay. Again, we're trying to win now, and I've made it clear I want a super pen. And if it was not sign Adam Ottavino or go out and go get Brad Hands, again, one of those like crappy extra cheap guys on a 1-year deal, I'll take Ottavino on an extra year at 38 because I don't think he's going to be a guy who he doesn't need a fastball. He doesn't need that. As long as that slider's spinning, he can be an effective. And I love how he's not the locked-in 8th inning guy. He could be the 7th inning guy. He could be the 6th inning guy if you want to use Brooks Raley as a pure high leverage arm. So it takes the pressure. You're not going to see him. He'll be that Trevor May role. All 3 guys are gassed. Then you see David. I hope, I would think Diaz, Raley, Robertson, and then he's in the new Trevor May role. I am completely fine with that because of the slider, and he's not a guy who needs velocity to be effective. Again, would I have loved it to be a kind of the David Robertson deal, 1 year, $10 million and done? Yes, but from New York, he's pitched in New York and he pitched well. Probably wants to retire in New York. I'm fine with it because again, he doesn't need that fastball to be effective. Even with him getting older, he could still probably pitch into his 40s just because of that slider. So I gave it a B. I'm pretty happy with it.
Day that we signed Ottavino, I listed weaponry on stream. Adam Ottavino with his super sweeper slider. You've got the tunnel slider with Brooks Raley, and you got the razor blade slider with Edwin Diaz. Looks like Jeremy Hefner seems to have a type, doesn't he? I am okay with him coming back only because even though I have the worries about him being overworked like he was, they do have some more protection around him. You have a little bit more veteran relievers where, you have 4 reliable arms or 4 locks in this bullpen, aside from 2 last year where it was just Ottavino and Diaz. So you multiplied your trustworthy pieces. And, Hefner seemed to really help him out, not just with his slider command, but his sinker command. I mean, he really dove into, elite status last year. I personally think that he should have been an all-star, but that's just another story. I think he was better than some of the guys that were picked, but I give it a B because, of course, there is the concern with the age. Again, I wanted them to aim a little bit younger than they did, but they're looking to win right now. They're looking with these 2-year deals in this window, so I like Ottavino. I liked the addition from last year, not as much as Andrew did, but I liked it. It was a low risk and such a high reward last year. And even though I don't think he'll replicate the season he just had, I think he'll still be a very high quality reliever from the back end of the bullpen. Now, one of the biggest needs for the Mets this offseason was a 4th outfielder, and they filled that spot by signing Tommy Pham to a 1-year, $6 million contract. Pham is now 35 years old, and he's a primary left fielder as he joins his 6th team in his career. Pham's specialty is hitting left-handed pitching, career 132 WRC plus hitter against lefties, and a 115 WRC plus hitter last season against lefties.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him multiple times. Still not a big fan of Pham. I definitely think that, there was a lot of guys available. He wasn't my first choice. I was hoping that with the mistake with Darren Ruffwood going with a guy who is so far past his prime and up there in age that maybe they try something a little different. They obviously did not. They went with Tommy Pham, a guy who he had his good years, like I've said before, but we've seen him progressively get worse. He's had his not necessarily off the field troubles because some of them have been on the actual baseball field as well, but he isn't the greatest guy to have in your organization, in your clubhouse. And we've seen him have plenty of altercations and things like that. So I don't think his talent is worthy of his personality. I just don't think that's the case with him. And I also don't like that he's like a 4th outfielder, but the only position he technically can play is left field. And he doesn't really play it at a high level. So he isn't that your actual real 4th outfielder where if Nimmo needed a day off, if Quintana was hurt, Starling Marte just had double groin surgery, like a guy who could actually float around the outfield, play it at a high level, and then he's a lefty killer, but what we need is some power against left-handed pitchers, and he doesn't really have that. I mean, he hit some home runs, but it was in Great American Small Park. So, again, he isn't really – he kind of fits what the Mets absolutely needed because they had nothing of it, but just barely. So I think that there were better options. he's up there in age, so I imagine he's going to get even worse. So he's my lowest ranking on. I had him at a D.
Yeah, I give this deal a C minus. Nothing to get excited about. Obviously, the Mets needed a fourth outfielder. A lot of the players that the fans wanted were all players that wanted to still start, and that's something the Mets could not provide these guys with unless you kind of platoon them with Mark Canha or something. Whoever's coming here is basically a glorified Kevin Pillar. If he can provide those numbers like Kevin Pillar, I mean, this is going to turn out to be a pretty decent deal. But if not, I mean, we could probably see another Albert Almora Jr. If he plays something like that, which we definitely don't need. The Mets really got to start, getting depth in the outfield. They have absolutely no depth. The Alex Ramirez, he's not even ready. They traded away PCA. Obviously, Kelenic went in the Diaz deal. They're really struggling to find some outfield depth. What are you going to put Mark Vientos out? And I mean, they have to rely on, a Jeff McNeil to be versatile and go out in the outfield. They're going to have to do the same thing with Brett Beatty. I don't know. This is just a backup outfielder, C type deal. I get even too with Frank saying giving him a D. I get it. There's not much to really go off of with Tommy Pham.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a fourth outfielder. I think, and Ant said it best. All the guys that we wanted to be that fourth outfielder, except one guy. For some reason, he's still hanging out there. But we're not going to talk about him. One of starting jobs: Mancini, McCutchen, all those guys, Duvall. Mets had offers on the table for 2 of those 3. But they wanted the starting role, and they knew they would get guaranteed playing time. Tommy Pham, great? No. Is Tommy Pham a fourth outfielder? Yes. But I like like Frank said, he's really only a fourth outfielder in maybe the corners. He's not playing center field at this age. So you still have that concern if Nimmo were to go down. Who the hell's playing center field? And Tim LeCastro, you're going to get some burn, bud, because you're right now the backup quality center fielder on the depth chart if you're not moving Mark Canha to center field, which none of us want to see full time. So, again, it's a D. Again, if he hits left-handed pitching and plays corner outfield, and maybe you platoon him and Canha, like we saw last year, Canha was better against righties. Pham hits lefties, cool. But again, you still don't have that backup center fielder, kind of like you still don't have a backup shortstop. Guillorme can do it, but do you want to see Guillorme play it every way? Same thing with Mark Canha. Canha can play center field, and we're not putting Starling Marte in center field, so it's literally him. And then Tim LeCastro is your backup center fielder. We'll give it a D.
I give a C minus. It's not my first choice. It 100% isn't. I think that he can provide the value of a fourth outfielder if you do, but it's just kind of like the fear of the injuries with our outfielders and if they're going to actually hold up and he's going to be a starting caliber player at any point. Kind of sucks. I'm not thrilled about it, but I think there's a little bit still more offense than we're expecting in there. And you could see it, but you also could see pretty bad. Kind of in the middle. Like, I feel like he could give you value, but then you also could see the worst of him. And the most recent move of the Mets offseason came from behind closed doors because the Mets are pretty sneaky with this one, but they extended Jeff McNeil to a 4-year, $50 million contract, buying out the last 2 years of arbitration. McNeil is now 31 years old and will earn over $6 million this season, over $10 million next year, and over $15 million in 2025 and 2026. The deal also includes a 5th-year team option worth over $15 million as well for 2027. McNeil was selected by the Mets in the 9th round of the 2013 MLB draft, spending his minor league career as a non-prospect before blossoming into a 2-time All-Star and winning the National League batting title last season.
Yeah, I got to give this one, and it's an A++ for me. I mean, 4 years, $50 million. This is a deal that I think is great for the Mets. It's great for McNeil, who's going to get up there in age. And, we always talk about when are the Mets going to sign their guys? Like, as we see what the Braves been doing with all of their players over the last couple of years. Jeff McNeil's one of those guys. I mean, he's not your power guy. He's going to be your average guy. He's going to be slapping those hits. I don't know how the whole shift thing's going to affect him, but I mean, the dude that bats over 300, except for that one that one season, was it 2021, where he batted 251, where he struggled. But Jeff McNeil's been a constant in the lineup. I still remember when everyone after 2021 season was worried about either him or what we're going to do. If we're going to trade him or we're going to trade JD Davis or Dom Smith. And obviously Jeff McNeil was the one that had the highest upside and turning his career and getting it back on track. And he's done that, wins the batting title. He's earned this contract. And, the last couple of years, it's for me has been worrying about when is Pete and when is, Jeff going to get their contract extensions. I think Pete may come next offseason when we have to worry about, the Otanis and Machado contracts. Maybe they'll see how they can, finagle that around. But getting Jeff McNeil done now, getting it out of the way, one less thing that we have to worry about moving forward. And I kind of like how the Mets have been doing business, keeping it quiet. We never saw that in the Wilpon era. So this is a breath of fresh air for me.
All right. The guy who should have went, I'll give him a B. I mean, it's a team-friendly deal, which, again, is great. But we'll see. His whole gimmick is he beats the shift. Well, guess what? The shift's going away. So we'll see how this gerbil does. Again, it's less than DJ LeMahieu. I thought the DJ LeMahieu contract was going to be the bar, and it was shorter than the LeMahieu, or less than the LeMahieu contract. So from that standpoint, cool. It's second baseman who hit 3 homers, but then we complain about Brandon Nimmo who hit 16. I think I'd rather have second half McNeil and hit 250 and hit 17 homers than give me a bunch of 330 BA with 2 homers. I'd rather have second half McNeil. So get back in the golf game, work the launch angle, maybe juice a little bit, because this team needs you to hit homers instead of singles. We got Mark Canha, we got Nimmo to hit singles. So if it's me, I'd rather have second half McNeil where he hit like 12 homers in like 3 months. So I'm like, yeah, I want that guy. But again, it's a team-friendly deal. It's a nice deal. It does get rewarded for being a non-prospect and getting a nice little contract. And hey, he's got a car coming from Lindor, so what an offseason for Jeff McNeil. But again, I don't want you hitting 300. I don't care about your 300 batting average. I need some homers. Give me that second half post All-Star game power surge. That, I hit 350, but I hit 2 homers. That's what this team needs. 2 homers. Give me the 20 homers and 240.
It was 9 home runs, and he got robbed by the dead ball. I mean, don't forget that was the juiced ball when McNeil was hitting the home runs. Let's not take that out of the discussion. But Jeff, I mean, what more can you want from the guy? He still provides you value offensively. He plays a really good second base, and he plays wherever you need him to play, whenever you need him to play. You need him to play left field? Okay. You need him to play right field? Okay. He probably could play first base. He used to play third base, then he had some hiccups. I don't know if we'll ever see him at third base again. Maybe they'll try it one more time. But you need him to bat leadoff? Okay. You need him to bat third, second, ninth, whatever. Like, he's just that utility Swiss Army knife, does everything for your team, runs out everything. It's a 7-run game. He's still running into the wall, busting up his knee because he still is just like that competitive. He's diving into first base. So I think all the things that he gives you to get him for that AAV, I think is really solid. He's a guy who I believe will age well because he doesn't rely on athleticism. He doesn't rely on power. He relies on discipline. He relies on skill, bat to ball. I think he can still do that at an advanced age. We've seen plenty of old players. My day watching guys like Rod Carew, like he was a guy who was able to have that longevity because he was a good bat to ball guy. I think the same could be said with Jeff McNeil. Rod Carew didn't need to hit a lot of home runs. So I think that somebody like McNeil, he's a guy that will always provide you that value. And what's cool about his deal is that last year is the team option, not the player option. So if McNeil is aging really well, they could keep him that extra year. If he isn't, you can cut him loose. Whereas these other guys like Narvaez and Ottavino, that's player options. So even if they suck, they're like, that means I'm really going to stay. So you guys really have to suffer and deal with me doing absolutely nothing. So I like that it's a team option. I'm glad, like Anthony said, we're getting to keep one of our home core, our guys. Nimmo, they did the same thing. But it was good to see them do it with multiple pieces. That Jeff McNeil, he's my favorite player, so I'm glad I get to see him for a few more.
Well, as much as I'd love to join Andrew in this one, I can't deny how good of a deal this was. This is an A+ move for me. I think that they did a fantastic job with this extension. They definitely preserved the next 4 years, which is almost guaranteed where you're going to get similar to the production that you got from him last year. I'm glad that, we got kind of left in the dark, and they definitely did this behind closed doors. I'm happy that, they kept this, as professional as it is. And also that seems to be the wishes from Pete Alonso as well, to keep that private as well. And I think that it's every right to do that. He was definitely a big piece to this lineup. He had a fantastic season, a fantastic bounce back season. I lost faith in him, and I'm happy that he just completely shut me up. I think it was a great move. As much as I love trolling McNeil fans because it's just way too easy, they get very short-tempered and they get red in the face. I like it. I think it definitely fits well with the second base position and how he is currently ranked. So now that takes us to your rapid fire stories. The Mets were among 6 teams scouting the showcase for free agent reliever Zach Britton. Britton is now 36 years old and coming off of multiple injuries in the past few years. After being DFA'd by the team a few weeks ago, the Mets have invited Khalil Lee to minor league spring training. Lee is currently still under investigation by the MLB for allegations of domestic violence. The Mets have hired former star outfielder Carlos Beltran as a special assistant to the general manager Billy Epler. Beltran returns to the Mets organization after mutually parting ways with the Mets as the manager due to his part in the 2017 Astros sign-stealing scandal. The Marlins have hired Terry Collins as a senior baseball consultant. Collins managed the Mets from 2011 to 2017 and led them to their first World Series appearance since 2000 back in 2015. Keith Hernandez and SNY have finally agreed to a new 3-year extension. Our beloved trio, Gary, Keith, and Ron, will now enter their 18th year together, which will pass Lindsey Nelson, Bob Murphy, and Ralph Kiner for the longest tenure in the Mets booth. Baseball broadcaster and commentator Tim McGarver has passed away at the age of 81. McGarver called games for the Mets from 1983 to 1998, following a 21-year career in the major leagues, split with the Cardinals, Phillies, Red Sox, and Expos. Parting words for episode 8 of the Mets Weekly Podcast.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think overall, like, my final grade for the whole offseason was a B minus, because they upgraded the bullpen, which I like. They kept key pieces, like Diaz and Nimmo, guys who had like big years for them. But as far as my biggest concern was offense, they didn't really improve it much. So that was my one big concern. But I hope I'm proven wrong. Like, I hope Omar Narvaez goes back to his all-star form, and that, Senga actually is more like a number 2 or number 1 pitcher than a number 3 pitcher. Like, I hope to be proven wrong on a lot of these grades. That's something we could all laugh about. But you know what? I mean, let's see what happens. I mean, this is the decision that they made. We can't change it now. So we got to root for these guys and just hope for the best.
Yeah, I'm happy we're done with the offseason. Now we can stop making videos being like, hey guys, you should sign these guys, and then they end up never signing them. So until next year in the trade deadline, that's when we can bring those up again. But again, it's an offseason of a lot of question marks, and we'll see a lot of risks. It's what this team is. You got to, if you're going to go for it. But they took a few risks that hopefully they think can pay off, and we'll see if Senga is as good as we hope he is.
I'd just like to see this team, considering how it ended last offseason, I just get right at the hot time, and hopefully it's during the playoffs. I mean, we saw what Philly did. Whether you win the division or not, it's always better to win the division and not have to play an extra round. But, this team needs to they need to do better with stamina, because the last 2 seasons, they kind of fell apart towards the end of the season. Now, I know the whole Marte situation kind of, derailed the offense a lot, but, this team needs to not just rely on Lindor and Alonso to do all the heavy lifting. They're going to have key pieces from everybody working out. Whatever Billy Epler does at this trade deadline is going to be probably the big deal, because obviously they didn't do anything last year. They really didn't. It seemed like they really didn't want to do anything because they were still evaluating the kids and what they wanted to do with them. So we'll see if maybe if Ohtani is available, if they're able to pry him away at the trade deadline. Now, maybe even Manny Machado will be available at the trade deadline because he's not signing his deal. Who knows? But I just want this team to go. I think even Buck Showalter said it during his press conference. Everyone wants to talk about getting to October. They have to get there first. So whatever they have to do to get there and stay hot when they need to be hot and try to get a freaking championship finally.
Yeah, I mean, as for me, I'm just ready for baseball. I mean, there's things in this offseason that I like, there's things that I dislike, but I'm ready to just put it all away, and I'm just ready to see baseball played on the field. You know, we can micromanage everything from GM mode as much as, you know, Andrew loves to do it, but we got to see the product on the field. And I'm excited for baseball, as I usually am, and I'm glad to start this one off with, baseball games that don't mean anything. So we can just relax and settle into it, just like how people vacation in Port St. Lucie, Florida. You know, they get to relax, and so do we. But other than that, that's episode 8. Thank you again to Anthony Rivera for joining us. Make sure to go check out his podcast once again. Links are in the description. All of us individually. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on TikTok, Twitter. We're, on multiple platforms. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you guys next time.